Scary fishing encounter. Back in the early 90s, I purchased a home in the small town I had grown up, which was located just up the hill from a small stream in which I had a lot of fond memories of fishing and exploring from my childhood days. One of the trips we used to take was to have our parents drop us off about 4 miles up the road, and then we would fish while wading down the creek, usually in our old cut-off jeans and a pair of old sneakers. The creek wound and cut through the mountain with some amazing fishing and would usually take us close to 8 or so hours to transverse back to town. Feeling the nostalgic after being away in the military, I decided to make the trek on my own and planned months in advance to take the trip. On the day of the trip, my wife dropped me off, and I wasted no time attaching my favorite lure and finding a safe spot to wade in. Almost 3/4 of the way down creek, I glanced at my watch and realized it would be a push to get to town before dark. I think being a little older, slower and getting lost in the nostalgia of the moment, I had underestimated my timing on the trip. I picked my pace up as well as I could on the slippery rocks. The land on each side of the creek was littered with thick laurels, so trekking off trail would have been careless at that point. As the sun began to descend lower, the high mountain slopes on each side made the creek area darken as I was within about a mile of the bridge which signaled the last trek into town. At that moment, in the thick brush along the creek, I heard a twig snap and a growl which I instinctively knew immediately was a black bear. Normally when camping or hiking I always carry a firearm, however when wading down a creek bed a slip and fall happens on occasion, so I decided to leave my sidearm at home. I began to pick up my pace, noticing that I was being flanked to my right with the bear seemingly trudging in the same direction. 50 yards downstream was a fork in the creek, and as I breached the turn, to my shock there stood a black bear directly in the middle of the creek about 25 yards ahead. Contemplating on what to do, suddenly the bear on my right burst from the bushes, bearing down directly toward my location, at which point I began pushing toward the other side of the stream. I grabbed up a rock, and as it came within arm's length it continued right past and charged the other bear. The bears fought for a few moments until one ran off with the other one in tow. Was never so glad to get home.